Hello, and welcome to the Moonshine Jesus Show. We welcome you, and we're very glad that you are joining us for today's show, where we'll be talking about the newest Marvel movie, Thunderbolts. But a couple of pieces of housekeeping here. We are brought to you by progressivechristianity.org. We encourage you to check them out. All kinds of resources there that I promise you'll be glad that you went to take a look at. We're also sponsored by the Progressive Christian Alliance, which is a inclusive, justice-focused network of faith communities and clergy committed to affirming the dignity of all people, embracing theological diversity, and following the teachings of Jesus through compassion, service, and advocacy for the marginalized. And also from the Christian left, it's a faith-based community that brings together progressive Christians and their allies to discuss current events, foster fellowship, and take action in social justice issues, all grounded in the teachings of Jesus. I want to also welcome on my good buddy, Caleb. How you doing today, Caleb?
I'm doing great today, Mark. Can't wait to talk about Thunderbolts.
I know. You ready to do some spoilers? You ready to spoil this show?
Oh, yeah. We're going to spoil this thing all over the place. And it's gonna
Absolutely.
Be great. Yes.
We got to, man. It makes it fun. It makes it fun, right?
It does.
We also need some beverages. Don't you think? We should do beverages.
Oh, I need a beverage.
It's an essential ingredient of the shows. Beverages, some themed beverages. I'm curious, what direction did you go with on your themed beverage?
I've got a Thunderbolt here today.
Ooh, a Thunderbolt. Tell me about it.
I Googled it, and this is a drink that has bourbon, and it has ginger liqueur, and it has bitters in it, and it is a Thunderbolt, and I'm going to enjoy it. How about you? What do you have today, Mark?
Well, I have to say there's one character in this movie that I was not really ever a big fan of in the other times that I saw this character. Okay. And they kind of redeemed themselves. As a matter of fact, their comedy, I thought, was one of the bright spots of it. The Red Guardian, right?
Yep.
And he's a White Russian, so I'm having a White Russian.
A White Russian. That makes a lot of sense. That's perfect.
Yeah, right. I had to go there, so I'm excited about it. Here's to a good show, sir.
Cheers, Mark.
We'll take a quick drop and we'll catch you on the other side.
Moonshine Jesus. Moonshine Jesus. Moonshine Jesus. Moonshine Jesus, won't you shine a light?
Welcome back to the Moonshine Jesus Show. We are entering our geeking out section where Mark and I will kind of geek out for a little while about Thunderbolts, and then we'll get into the theology and politics of it. So Thunderbolts, if you haven't seen it, it's a new release from Marvel, the latest in Marvel's Phase 5, and it takes this group of kind of anti-hero, superhero folks who have had a lot of screw-ups and puts them together as a team, and they are named after the Black Widow's soccer Little League Pee Wee
Little League soccer Pee Wee,
the Thunderbolts. And I've got a question for you about it, Mark. Okay, what's the best Marvel Phase 5 movie, and why is it Thunderbolts?
Yes, it is Thunderbolts. Partly because Phase 5 movies don't really feel like a phase.
What? No, it's a really high bar. It's been very good. It's been very cohesive. I don't know what you're talking about.
It feels more like a comma, doesn't it? It feels like a little placeholder on the way to whatever the next thing is.
Phase 5.
I mean, they got the asterisk on the
we hope that you look back and you don't remember it too much.
You don't think too much about it.
Did you pause for a while? Yes.
They got that asterisk on the Thunderbolt. I wonder if they should just put a comma there. Like, yes, we're just pausing for a minute here.
Phase 5. Yeah.
But it is. It definitely is Thunderbolts. I mean, in a lot of ways, I hate that it took having heroes that didn't have really incredible superhero powers to get back to what makes Marvel engaging. And like, you can relate to the characters. There is real risk which in the very earliest films, you felt like there was risk to the,
Yes.
and the further we went in, the less you felt like there was ever any real risk for any of the heroes. You frequently already knew that they were going to be in the next movie. I mean, it was just, and this one just felt grounded and real. These were people you could relate to who had traumatic past that they were trying to navigate and live and deal with. I really, really liked it. The storytelling was good. The humor was there. It wasn't obvious humor like we get in a lot of Marvel stuff now. So I caught myself in parts of the movie that were just kind of moving the story along.
Yeah.
Sitting there smiling at the screen because I was enjoying the whole thing. You know, it was just, I really liked it. So why did you think it's the best in Phase 5?
Oh no, I don't. No, just kidding. I mean, it clearly was what was the best. I did like Deadpool and Wolverine. I thought that one was fun, but a lot of them have been just bad. They have not been good. And I agree. I was sitting there thinking the same thing. Like, will these characters be in the next movie? I don't know. These are like minor characters that we don't really know.
The fact that they killed off a character in the first 20 minutes of the movie, I mean, that was when you immediately went, oh, okay. There's not a given here.
Yeah,
you know?
And I guess that's how it is how the early ones felt. And even thinking about how Iron Man, who came to hold the whole MCU together, was a relatively minor character in Marvel ahead of time, reminded me that like that is what the early Marvel movies felt like, and that's why they were fun to watch. And so it was also fun to see a bunch of people who didn't really know what they were doing, who didn't really mesh together, a lot of interesting personalities. That I think that was engaging. It was fun and it was funny to watch. And I think that's one of the reasons that I sat there and I'm like, okay, I'm invested in this. And so this movie did it took relatively unknown characters, it threw them together. What do you think about the approach of taking these other characters that we're not using some of the big names in the MCU? We're putting together these unknown characters. And what do you think about the chemistry between them?
I was really worried that they could hold the movie, frankly. Without a big name, because we're so used to getting that in Marvel.
Right.
Bucky would be the biggest, really, in terms of people, a character that we've seen do some pretty heroic stuff and some pretty big movies. But the way they presented him, that wasn't what was going on in his life. He was he was a congressperson at that point. And so
who also didn't know what he was doing, right? A freshman congressperson who hadn't gotten anything passed, right? So he also was out of his element.
Very much, very much. At first, I was really worried. Early in the movie, I was really worried because it felt to me like the characters were too similar. Troubled past, where they had been hurt, where they had done some questionable things, and then were trying to maybe you never really knew, but maybe they were intentionally working towards some personal redemption or something. It felt very similar, but the more that it played out, and honestly, when they were trapped in that fire, the fire room, which they figured out was they were there for, that's when I felt like they started like quickly. I started realizing, oh no, okay, these are very unique individuals, and they're going to be able to tell the story well as a team. I loved that they were kind of helping each other, but also hindering each other constantly because they didn't quite understand how to work together or what this one person's strength was or how to best utilize it. And there was all this vying for position and stuff. I kind of liked that. It was fun.
I thought it was fun too. And I thought the fact that they didn't really get along was fun too. And that takes me back to even like a decade ago when we saw like Captain America Civil War and we saw infighting in the team. That was I think has been one of the highlights of the MCU. I like that one. And so I think that them not figuring out how to get along, I think was really interesting. And I thought the characters were interesting too. And I thought that as the movie went on, the chemistry between them grew, and I really liked seeing that group of misfits together. And so I take it you're drinking a White Russian, and so I'm taking it that the Red Guardian, he was really your favorite. Did you have a favorite character out of the Thunderbolts?
I think it was the Red Guardian, and that's because there was some redemption just for me
Yeah.
and the character. Like I almost didn't enjoy the previous time we saw him on the screen.
Yeah.
I almost wished I could almost feel myself wishing that his role would just hurry up and get past so I could move on to the other folks. And in this one, every time he was around, I wanted him on there. He delivered some of the best lines, and his character, I loved how he almost had this semi hero worship of Bucky. I mean, that was kind of fun. So yeah, I liked all the characters. He was the one I found most entertaining. I'm not sure if there was a character I liked the most, though, but he was definitely, for me, the most entertaining one. And I love that he kind of became a character I really like. How about you? What did you think?
I mean, he was a lot of fun, and David Harbour is just so talented, and he is
amazing.
Funny, and so I think them allowing him to be funny and kind of be gregarious was a lot of fun. And I think Black Widow was certainly the heart of the group. I kind of liked seeing our ragtag Captain America back and seeing what had
he was one that I never liked either, and I don't know, I liked him a little bit more this time around, but I also think, though, that's sort of one of the weird parts about this show is that the ragtag Captain America that we got seems so different than that same character in the last show. Like it was almost, for me, too much of a shift in character. That one threw me off a little bit, honestly. That was the one character where they all shifted some. They all were moving towards redemption.
Yes,
but his just felt more of a going from reverse to fifth gear to me. It just was odd. Yeah.
It was a major shift. I like that we saw the absorbed Captain America. I think we could see some more of that in some subsequent media.
Yeah.
But I thought it was just interesting to see just such a stark dichotomy between him and, say, Steve Rogers. So I thought that was kind of fun to see. So, Mark, I've got a very important question for you.
Yes.
So we do have an asterisk on the name Thunderbolts because they are the new Avengers. But we also discover that Sam Wilson really wants that name, the Avengers. Who do you think is going to get the Avengers name, Mark? Who's going to be the real Avengers?
Well, hold on just a second. I need to scratch off one of my make me look stupid questions. Can you? There goes one of them. Here's what I think. I think that he will win and get the right to it. Sam Wilson will.
Yeah.
However, just because of the comics, I think we're going to have the kind of the way that the Red Guardian tried to win the name and say we're going to be the new Avengers.
Avengers with a Z.
Yeah. I think we're going to see a lot of that. I think we're going to get West Coast Avengers. I think we're going to get all of these Avengers that are going to have something else added. And we've seen some setup on that. We're going to get the Young Avengers. We're definitely. So that's what I think. I think Sam will win. Of course, he's going to win. He's Captain America. But I think we're still going to see a lot of other groups that are going to have Avengers in some way as part of their name.
Yeah.
I mean, come on, Sam Wilson can't lose, can he? He's Captain America.
Hey, look, I think they're going to combine. I think that they're gonna have an Avengers with some of our longtime super Captain America, real Captain America, and Hulk and Thor, and maybe some of these new folks as well. And maybe that's what the next Avengers movie is going to be. We know that Avengers is on the slate; it's coming up. That's my thought on what's going to happen. I think they're all going to come together.
Certainly
okay, possible. Mark, one thing that was really unique about this movie, and I
Yeah.
know that we're going to dive into most of this in the next segment, but this movie is a superhero movie, but it deals with some really heavy themes that superhero movies don't often deal with. And I thought stylistically they did some very interesting things. We've got some impressive kind of visual representations of what's happening, like the darkness flooding all over Manhattan, right?
Yeah.
And talking about depression and all that. So I wonder, what do you think just generally about incorporating heavy themes like this into the movie? How do you think they did
Oh, I think
with
they
those heavy
did.
themes?
I think they did great, and I think it particularly around the heavy issues around mental illness
Mhm.
uh, and mental health. I think that that's really important that they do that because there is still somehow such stigmas around it in general society. So to put it front and center in a big film like this, to handle it relatively well, I think, and to address it in a way that doesn't villainize it, but really invites you to be sympathetic about it and try to understand. I thought was a really smart move, and I thought they navigated that space pretty well. I mean, did you think they
I
navigated it well?
No, I absolutely did. I thought that, all the characters were dealing with this throughout the movie, and even we open with a narration from Black Widow where she's talking about depression, and that's not something that we typically get
Right?
in movies. And so I thought that they were able to deal with that. We're able to keep the characters in a place where we were rooting for the characters, where
Yeah.
we saw both the best and worst of the characters. I thought that was an impressive choice, and the fact that they were still able to keep it lighthearted and funny in moments, to me
Yeah.
was pretty impressive,
I
because
agree.
a lot of movies fold under their own self-importance and
Yes.
trying to be something they're not too. And this was still a superhero movie, and it was
Mhm.
about these imperfect characters, and it leaned into that. And I think maybe that's one of the reasons that I really love this movie, is
Yeah.
because it embraced the imperfection of the characters and the imperfection of life, and it made me want to embrace the imperfections of Marvel, and even Marvel Phase 5. I was
You mean the
ready to
comma?
embrace all that. Yeah, the comma. Not the asterisk, but the
The
comma.
comma. I think that's a fair assessment. I can see that. Yeah, I like that. I
Okay.
like that.
Okay. Speaking of commas, let's take a comma in our show
Yeah,
here. We're going
indeed.
to move into the Theopolitico segment. Let's take a comma, let's take a break, and have another drink. Then we'll get into it.
Welcome back to our Theo Politico segment. So I'm going to take maybe some unexpected routes here.
Okay.
Uh, I want to start with this thought. So in the show, the team is set on a mission sort of under false pretenses by the
Mhm.
government. And
Yeah.
it brought the question up for me. How do we know, when you put it in the context of today's world, how do we know when to resist?
Mhm.
And what does going along, uh, when does that make us morally responsible if we don't resist?
Yeah, I think certainly whenever we see obvious abuses of power that are used to oppress and hurt others, that we have a
Mm,
moral obligation to
yeah,
resist. And I think that's true just both as human beings, citizens who care about other people in our land, just being a
yeah,
decent human being. I think it's also certainly a mandate of our faith that if we see people being hurt, then we have an obligation to help those people who are being hurt. I think one of the things that is so difficult about our time right now is that part of government even existing is that it has the consent of those being governed,
Yeah.
and it is supposed to then to uplift those who are governed, to ensure the protections of those who are being governed. That I don't think we're seeing that right now. I don't think
Mhm.
we're seeing a government that has our best interests at heart. And I'm not sure that we're seeing a government that has the consent of the governed either. And so this is where resistance becomes increasingly important, because we are at a critical stage here where if we do not resist, if
Yes.
we do not take actions to ensure that through our democratic process we have removed Donald Trump from office, then we're not going to end up with a democratic republic at the end of this term. And
Yeah.
so I've heard a lot of people say things like, well, just 3.5 more years or something like that. And
Yeah.
I think we've got to be wiser than that, than to
Agree.
think that the democratic process is going to work in the way that we expect it to work. It's not, unless we are actively pushing for Donald Trump to be removed from office. And so that means that all those those elected officials that we have entrusted with power, that they have to step up too. Because I do think people are resisting, they're taking to the streets, they're doing what they can, but
Yeah.
we need people in positions of authority and power to be
Yes.
resisting as well. And so I think that this is the clear call for us to say, hey, you in positions of power, do not give up, do not give in. What do
Yeah.
you think, Mark?
No, I completely agree, and I think we see that too much from our representatives of them kind of falling in line and just going along with it.
Mhm.
And if you being obedient props up injustice, you're not being faithful. There's no righteousness about that. If anything, faith is supposed to ask hard questions, and it's supposed to go and try to make sure that the most vulnerable folks in our society are the most cared for folks in our
Mhm.
society. And so, yeah, it's complicity if you don't do anything. If you just kind of try to roll with the punches, and that you are being part of the problem, and there's nothing righteous or faithful about that. And we need folks who are willing to, as you say, step up and speak out and say, this is not okay. We're not going to allow this to happen. Uh, Easier said than done, because it does mean risk.
Yeah.
It means risk, but we are at the point that, if, particularly someone who identifies as a follower of the teachings of Jesus, that's what got Jesus killed, was
Mhm.
speaking out, and he
Yeah.
knew that he was risking everything for it. And
Yeah.
and if we're going to be honest followers, there is a point at which we have to say, I need to speak out, and I need to do everything I can to ensure the safety and health of all people.
Yeah. And I think that a lot of people, especially those who are elected, they're so afraid of retaliation in the government. They're also so
Yeah,
afraid of losing their positions of power that they're
right.
not willing to step up and, like you said, fall in line. And I think that we've got wealthy individuals who have historically been more progressive in their views that
Yeah,
also are not using their money and influence and power to stand up to Donald Trump and this administration. And I think we need people in those positions too, to not just say, well, what's best for my pocketbook, but to
right.
say what's best for society, what's best for the common good. And man, if we could see more of that, that'd be great.
Yeah, no kidding. Well, so another question: the Thunderbolts, kind of collectively and individually, end up being tools of the same system that
Mhm.
ultimately wounded them.
Yeah.
Is that justice, or is that just sort of recycled violence?
Yeah, not justice, right? That in the movie we see these people, yes,
Yeah,
serving their abusers, and it
yeah.
is so. I mean, most of us aren't becoming super secret spies for the government
Right.
that killed us or killed our families or whatever, but we are perpetuating the systems that wound us.
Hmm.
And I think that, uh, you know, I think the Republican Party in particular has done an incredible job of getting people to vote against their own self interests. And so abortion's a case in point, right? Using
Yeah.
abortion to get people to vote against their own self-interest. It's an
Right.
intentional manipulation of
Absolutely.
religion, of faith, for political gain and benefit.
Yeah.
You know, most people in those positions of power, they don't actually care about abortion. They care about power. And so,
Mhm.
yeah, I think it's certainly true that we see that in our society. And one of the ways that we've seen it play out most clearly is in how our elected officials have manipulated faith and
Yeah.
voters to remain
I,
in
I,
power.
I want to follow that up with
Yeah.
a related question. What does it
Mhm.
say about, I'm going to call it the soul of a nation, when
Mm.
redemption is outsourced to the very people the system broke?
Yeah.
Because we sort of have that going on
Yeah.
with the Thunderbolts, but we also, I think we can see it in our world today.
Yeah. Yes. I mean, I think in terms of how we see it in our society today, that we've got these folks who are in positions of power and authority, who are entrusted with both the direction and the soul of our
Mhm.
nation, that are also invested in perpetuating the system as it is.
Yeah.
And so, and then the folks who are trying to speak out for those who are oppressed and marginalized, or even for the common good and for the sake of democracy, are people who are being damaged, hurt by the system, ostracized by
Yeah.
the system as well. And so it's a complicated thing. What do
Yeah.
you think about it all?
I think it is complicated, and it's also pretty disgusting, frankly. And one of the
Yeah.
places that I think we can see it the most clearly is in the prison industrial complex,
Hmm.
uh, where it is the systems that people exist within that frequently set them up in places in life that cause them to be incarcerated. And then we do things like have them go out and do community service for the very system that designed incorrectly and caused them to end up. Yeah, there's this maddening circle that
Yeah.
goes on there, right? And I think we see that in lots of other things, but I think this is one of us the clearest, and it gives us a lot of ability, I think, to analyze it and say, well, then what do we do? How do
Yeah.
we redeem the system? And instead of just repeating into it and stuff, I think we've got to start looking at of dismantling systems and rebuilding
Yeah.
systems, and
Yeah.
building up the systems that would be more helpful. Like in this particular case, like mental health,
Hmm.
addiction support, economic opportunities, education opportunities. We need to build those up, which right now we're seeing all of those getting torn down, which makes you kind of go,
Cut.
oh, okay, I think I understand what they're doing here. They like the system that's broken the way that it is. It just self perpetuates and feeds itself. But
Yeah.
I think that's for me, that's kind of the clearly defining absolute horror of how we do it, and kind of points to the things we could be doing that we need to dismantle those systems, particularly for profit prisons.
Yes.
Aren't they're not motivated to do anything but bring people back in. So
That's
there's a
right.
lot of work that needs to be done there. For
And
sure,
maybe
right?
you've seen that meme, Mark, to your point, that says things that must never be operated for profit: healthcare, prisons, and education. Those
Yeah, I like
correspond
that.
exactly with life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, right? One of the biggest
Yeah,
things that we can do is stop letting capitalism be capitalism
yeah,
at the expense of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, right? It was
yeah,
never supposed to be that.
yeah. I completely agree.
Yeah.
Um, So we got time for one more question to sneak in here. So we've got the Thunderbolts, which are basically a team of, and I don't, of hurt people, people
Mhm.
who are trying to find their purpose. But um, the question I have, because that seems to be the thing they have in common,
Mhm.
is that enough to build something meaningful around? Uh,
In
I'll
terms of
leave it
a
there.
in terms of a
To build a
show,
community, a
in
community.
terms of a
Yeah.
community, I
Like
think it,
they're kind of brought together because of their trauma, and it's kind of
yeah,
what bonds them in a way.
I think that trauma bonding is real. That's something that happens, that definitely happens to
Absolutely.
people, and that people find their people wherever you are, and you find hopefully people who you can build community with and all. I would
Yeah.
say, though, that at a point it has to be something beyond the trauma. And so I think I've seen this happen a lot in churches, that people who have been abused by churches, people who have been hurt by church trauma, have come together kind of around that. Like I know
Yeah.
of whole communities that have been built around like the trauma of religious abuse. And
Hmm.
at a certain point,
Yeah.
there's something more that's needed than just the trauma of that religious experience.
Mm.
That and I think maybe I also mean this in terms of deconstruction and reconstruction, that a lot of times there are communities built around deconstruction, and at a certain point there needs to be something more than that, like
Yeah.
reconstruction. And
Good.
so I have then seen folks need to be in a community for a time and then need to move on. And so
Yeah.
let me give an example of something where I've seen this. Like in terms of folks who are trans and transitioning, that
Mm.
like I have seen folks need a religious community that is devoted to LGBTQ plus folks, specifically during the times of transition. And then I have
Yeah.
seen folks be like, okay, I'm on the other side of this. This isn't my whole identity. This is like one piece of the whole
Yeah.
pie, and I need to be nurturing the other pieces of the pie too. And I want to be a part of a community that helps me do that. So I'd say it's
Yeah.
a good point that yes, community can form, but often more is needed than just the trauma element. What do you think about it, Mark?
No, I completely agree. Shared trauma, of course, it's a bond. Anything can be a bond if it's shared, if common experiences. But if you let it sit there, it doesn't build a future, right?
Yeah.
You need healing, and healing is more than just simply figuring out how to survive together.
Hmm.
Um,
Oh, that's a good way to put it.
there's some wholeness that needs to happen, right?
Hmm.
You need to address the other issues and figure out how to acknowledge the pain and live beyond the pain, and we grow in wholeness together. And I think
Yeah.
that good, healthy churches do that and help folks with that. And I think that that's really the goal, not just in churches. I think any healthy community would take that more of that approach. And I think it's really
Yeah.
important that we do so. Listen, we could I've got a whole list of questions that I could be asking, but we also don't want to miss our favorite segment where you've already stole a question and I'm trying to get to it as fast as possible so you can't steal any more questions.
Yeah.
So we're going to take a quick drop and come back on the other side with our Make Me Look Stupid segment.
Welcome back to the Moonshine Jesus Show. We appreciate you sticking with us till the end here. We are entering our final and favorite segment, the Make Me Look Stupid segment, where we ask each other questions to try and make our co-host look stupid, or we might want a prediction, or there might be something we generally just don't understand and we want clarification on. And so, Mark, I have a question for
Yeah.
you.
All right.
One of the scenes that really spoke to me was when they were in kind of this darkness and they were going through the different rooms of the house and all, and they were seeing Bobby's experiences that had led him to the trauma that he had.
Yeah.
There's this moment where Bobby is confronting the sentry, the dark sentry, the shadowy figure. And Bobby has to go and confront him, try to fight him, and he's fighting him. And as he's fighting him, he's getting darker and darker, and he's getting sucked more into that. What does that say? Both in terms of the movie, and then what does that say about society today? Is it making any kind of commentary on that?
Yeah, obviously. I mean, it rolls back to that saying of "Don't become the monster you're fighting,"
Mm,
and particularly if you're approaching it with the things that make the monster to you. frequently it can feel right to adapt the tools that the monster is using to challenge the monster and just recreate it. And we certainly see that in society a lot, where um, violence is faced with violence, and we think that that's going to solve it, and all it does is teach us that violence begets violence, and that violence can beat violence, but it just perpetuates it. So yeah, and I think that's the real problem, is that we have to analyze what's going on, see the monster, and figure out what it is that will counter it, rather than resist it with its own forces.
Yeah.
That's my
Yeah.
short answer to it. What do you think? I mean, people write books on this kind of stuff, man.
They do. I think that's a great answer. And I think that this maybe is my favorite scene in the movie, because you could see Bobby just wailing away on his other self, trying to destroy it, trying to get over it, trying to fight the monster, right?
Right.
And his newfound friends, these people who didn't really have much reason to care about him at all,
Yeah.
they find a way to get past their own obstacles, the things that are
Yeah.
surrounding them. They get past that. They overcome the physical darkness that's between them and Bobby. And they go, and what saves Bobby is not beating the monster into submission, but it is the community of ragtag people who should have never been together in the first
Right.
place, wrapping their arms around him and saying, "It's gonna be okay.
Yeah.
Stop, Bobby." And
Pretty amazing.
they wrap their arms around him, and it pulls him out from the abyss. And I thought, God, that's a good
Yeah.
metaphor for what life ought to be like what we ought to be striving for in society, to uplift
Mhm.
each other, to care about each other. But certainly when we're talking about faith communities, that's what faith communities should be. All too often, faith communities make people feel worse about themselves, make people
Yeah.
go deeper into that darkness, that abyss.
Yeah.
And when churches are doing what they should, when people of faith are doing what they should, it's about rallying around and wrapping your arms around each other and saying, it's going to be okay. We're going to
Yeah.
get through this together. And it's amazing how just a simple act like that can really make all the difference in people's lives, even if it seems like something small at the moment, that it's something that makes a big difference. So I loved that part of the movie. For me,
Oh,
I'm
yeah.
like, wow, that's not something you see all the time in movies. So
No, it's not. Absolutely. I really almost don't want to ask my question. I'd rather finish the show right there, but that's the way this show works. So I am going to ask my question, and I'm going to let that pick the question I'm going to ask, since we were already talking
Okay.
about Bob.
Yeah.
I'm curious. At the end of the movie, we see him at the top of Avengers Tower, or whatever they're going to end up calling it, with the new Avengers.
With a Z.
How stable is Bob after what you just talked, after confronting the void?
Yeah.
How stable do you think he really is?
I think in universe, one of the things that we're going to see is him continue to struggle with how to navigate that. And I think eventually what we'll see is him come to a point like the Hulk comes to, where he's able to kind of blend both parts of himself together to be a more effective person, which I think is a pretty powerful thing for how we all ought to live our lives.
Absolutely.
But I also think that this is kind of an important question when we're talking about mental illness generally, is that we often have this narrative, even that as we're trying to break down the stigma on mental illness, that it's like something that you get past, or it's
Right.
something that you struggle with for
Exactly.
like a time and then it's gone. And
Yeah.
that's just not the way that works. That
Right.
that this is something that you
We're-
live with your whole, that these are things that you live with your whole life that are a part of who you are.
Yeah.
And there are times when things go really well and things are like under
Yeah.
control. And then there are times when things do not go well and it is all just kind of falling apart. I think we're going to see that struggle for Bobby, or Bob, or Robert, the century over the coming movies that that I hope he's in. But I think that we'll eventually get to a point where he's able to embrace all sides of himself. And honestly, that's when we tend to do better as human beings anyway. When we're able to say, "This is who I am, and I'm going to have good days and bad days, and I'm just going to let you know right now." And whenever we can embrace people, whenever we can say that for ourselves, and whenever we can embrace people who are telling us that and not judge people for that, we're all better off.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think I love that they had, when they mention it to him, he basically says that he's concerned about even using any powers right now because it could trigger the void. And I love that it's kind of showing that his beginning to understand what's going on and the slow management of it and the steps that have to be taken. And I'm with you. I hope we get to see more of this character. And I hope that they handle it as well as they handled some of the other issues of depression and everything in the movie, that we do see him struggling and having to work with it and learn from it. And sometimes it doesn't quite work out. And he will hopefully grow through those moments and learn more. I think that could be very helpful and healing for a lot of people to see the realities that live out in their lives being played out on the screen in a way that's sympathetic and understands and is even educational. I think that could be a beautiful thing.
I think you're right. And I guess the thing that they did so well in this is that they were talking about a serious issue, but not in the way that Marvel's been trying, I think, in this phase and the last one, to talk about more serious issues, to embrace different areas of diversity. And it has kind of felt forced, and this felt very natural.
Agreed.
And I think that's one of the reasons that I at least really enjoyed it. So Thunderbolts was fun to talk about. I'm glad that this came out. I hope that this redeems some of Marvel and it, sets the MCU back on a decent course.
Please.
Yes, please. Yeah. Although, the shows, the series have been good. We've had Loki, Daredevil, Born Again was a lot of fun too, and so I appreciated those. But the movies, they need to get back on track.
Yeah,
but
absolutely.
There's not another Marvel movie coming out next week, Mark. But you had an idea for a movie for next week. What's
there's a we do a lot of fun kind of superhero action movies and serious, and there's a movie coming out on Apple TV that is sci-fi. But it's sort of a goofy sci-fi that takes on some serious questions. It's called Murderbot. And real quickly, the description that I have is that it's a rogue security android who just wants to binge watch media, but ends up protecting humans on a dangerous mission and accidentally starts having feelings as well. So one person described it as goofy sci-fi with a side of existential crisis. That sounds fun to me. What do you think?
That sounds like a lot of fun to me. Okay, next week we'll watch Murderbot. I believe it is on Apple TV.
Correct.
So if you want to watch it between now and then, you can find it right there. Great suggestion, Mark. Hey, we appreciate all of you being here with us. It's always so fun to start our week off with you all talking about pop culture, theology, and politics. We also appreciate all of our sponsors that make this happen as well. We can't wait to see you next week when we'll talk about Murderbot on the Moonshine Jesus Show.
Moonshine Jesus, the rising sun. Moonshine